Australia has supplanted China as the dominant lender across the Pacific as the federal government ploughs billions of dollars into the region. The latest version of the Lowy Institute's Pacific Aid Map also shows Australia has maintained its position as the region's largest aid donor. Now, Foreign Affairs reporter Stephen Jedjets joins us now to explain all of this. Stephen, what are the big shifts we're seeing here when you look at this map?
Yeah, Gemma, there is both continuity and change when you look at this map. Continuity when it comes to foreign aid, but change when it comes to loans. Now, as you mentioned, ever since the Lowy Institute started to put together this map, it's been clear that Australia is the largest aid donor in the Pacific. And that remains the case in this recent map. What you see really is Australia first and daylight second, followed by countries like New Zealand, China and the United States. But Australia now gives something in the order of 37% of all official development assistance across the Pacific. So that gives you a sense of just how major a role Australia's playing. What we're seeing shifting, though, is what's happening in the lending space. Now, up until about 2020, it was actually China that was the main lender, particularly for infrastructure across the region. We saw, particularly in the early 2010s, China sign a number of loans with the Pacific Island nations, and that meant that it was really the main debtor in the region. It was the main country that countries went to if they wanted to borrow money to build things. Since 2020, that has really shifted, and this latest aid map, which has data from 2024, really cements this picture. It's now Australia rather than China that is the main lender. Chinese lending has really fallen away, and Australia, through a number of new facilities, is stepping in with loans, not just to help protect budgets, as we saw in Papua New Guinea, but also to help build things in the Pacific. So that does represent quite a stark shift from what we saw only 5 or so years ago.
Stephen, are there some risks here for Australia?
Yeah, absolutely there are, Gemma. The same risks that China faced. The big question for the Pacific here is how much debt can you sustainably face or can you sustainably hold? Now, China actually faced a bit of pushback in the Pacific over some of its lending, particularly in Tonga, where there was a feeling that the government there borrowed too heavily and then faced really inordinate pressure to pay it back. It became a real political hot potato in that country. Australia now is going to be facing the same questions. Now, of course, Australia says its lending is carefully calibrated. It does not make loans or approve projects that would put dangerous levels of debt on Pacific balance sheets. But the reality is, as Australia emerges as the main lender as well as the main aid donor in the region, it's going to have to grapple really profoundly with some of these difficult questions around the sustainability of debt and around the quality of the projects. If the projects are good, they tend to pay themselves off. But if they're not, that's when you get into trouble.
And so does this mean China is now a minor player in the Pacific or just recalibrating its approach here?
It's more that it's recalibrating its approach. China is still a player in the Pacific, not as big as it once was, perhaps, in some ways, at least when it comes to aid and infrastructure spending. But what we're seeing in this aid map is the way that China's using localised grant spending. Its grant spending has actually gone up to really bolster its influence behind key projects in a number of really high priority countries. So China is perhaps a little bit more agile than it once was. And even in the infrastructure space, it hasn't been totally pushed to the side, because if you look at the big multilateral institutions that still are major players in the region, a lot of the contracts that they hand out go to Chinese state-owned enterprises, and they are still behind a large number of many very highly visible infrastructure projects in the region, even though China isn't actually funding them. It's funded by other countries, including, ironically, Australia. So China is still a major presence in the Pacific, but this map paints a really interesting picture about how dominant a force Australia has become, at least when it comes to aid and to lending.